The received wisdom goes something like this. Once upon a time, there were lots of massively multiplayer online role-playing games, each trying something different in an attempt to create a truly immersive virtual world. Then World of Warcraft came along and showed everyone how it's done. The end. In this video, I'm going to argue that the truth is more complicated, that World of Warcraft and other very successful massively multiplayer games like Lineage prove that their way of doing things works, that their particular brand of gameplay brings in the masses and allows for exponential growth, the massive in massively multiplayer. But what trends in current multiplayer gaming suggest is that massive may not matter that much anymore. On the one hand, we live in a time when even WoW no longer boasts the player numbers it once did, and AAA publishers seem reluctant to back such behemoths. Veteran creators in the genre such as Richard Garriott and Mark Jacobs turning to crowdfunding and angel investment to kickstart their multi-user dreamscapes. On the other hand, games like Destiny 2 and GTA Online, or Minecraft or Roblox, prove that if the desire to play the WoW model of MMO may have diminished, the desire to play with others in a shared space has certainly not. If anything, that desire seems to be greater than ever, not just on the part of players, but developers like Bungie and Rockstar are desperate for their live service business models to be the thing that keeps them afloat for decades to come. The big difference is that whilst these games are massive in terms of their player bases, they're not massive in terms of how many players can play together at one time. In the case of Destiny, you branch off in small groups from a central hub. In the case of GTA, each instance has a maximum of 30 players. Is this really the only reason that these games can't be considered massive? The number of concurrent players on a shard? Is there some magic number that makes a game massive? The fact is there never has been. Early MMORPGs like Meridian 59 boasted a few hundred players at a time, Ultima Online a few thousand, WoW several thousand. But the number of players that can theoretically play together has always seemed to be a poor measure of whether a game is considered massive or not. The word itself may be problematic. Richard Garriott coined it in an effort to describe exactly what Ultima Online was at a time when there was nothing to compare it to. But it may be it's no longer the best description, not only for MMOs, but for what players want or what developers wish to achieve with their online offerings. Does the rise of games like GTA Online and Destiny, and the relative decline of WoW and EVERQUEST, suggest that the desire to be part of a virtual world is stronger than ever, but the massive part has become an anachronism? I don't actually believe this. I still like the idea of living a second life in a game, but the codified worlds that WoW and its brethren have become no longer interest me. And by the looks of things, many others. Games like GTA Online and Destiny lack the massive, but they provide a freshness that is lacking in MMO landmarks of the past, and also absent in upcoming efforts to ape their success. Rows of hotbars bordering the screen, zones of progressive difficulty connected by griffins, mobs standing around without rhyme or reason waiting to be attacked. We can see the seams in the design, how it all connects together. We know how all the loops work, and we know how long it's going to take to grind the rep required to get the golden shield of Amun-Ra. The one thing that these games have is that they're massive, thousands of players together all at once, but if the core gameplay is no longer attractive, is that enough anymore? It's true, GTA Online and Destiny are just as predictable as your average MMO. They're not shining examples of what a virtual world could be, but they are examples of how a simple change, the style of combat in the case of Destiny, FPS rather than hotbar management, or the setting in the case of GTA, a lawless modern day instead of a generic fantasy island, is all it takes sometimes for players to get excited about multiplayer gaming. The success of games like Minecraft and Roblox are proving not only do players want something new, they also want something that hasn't been seen since the early days of sandbox MMORPGs like Ultima and Second Life. Actual virtual worlds where they aren't chasing XP and mobs, but living a life, socializing and exploring. VR chat is another recent example of a desire for multiplayer gaming that eschews the massive tropes. What do all these mini MMOs prove? That the massive in multiplayer isn't the most important thing. For a long while it seemed like massive was the end game. But it isn't. Massive is just a consequence of engaging worlds and fun gameplay. Think about it, how many people do you actually interact with in WoW regularly? A small subset of players, your guild, a few random strangers. No doubt there's something grand about the idea of all these other players running about in these massive games. It can make the game feel more alive, but it's not really needed for the game to be engaging. And it's the reason these less than massive multiplayer games with instanced areas for small groups or bespoke servers for 30 or so players are succeeding so spectacularly, often crushing their more established massive competition. Survival games like Rust and Ark are providing the kind of creative gameplay MMORPGs long since abandoned, and the players of those games don't care one bit that they're on a small server. If the interactions with other people are so much more meaningful and engaging, then who cares whether you're playing with 10,000 people or 10? I'm not saying MMORPGs are dead by any means. I'm saying that our understanding of what an MMO is needs to change. If connections are being formed between players, challenges being met, clan wars being fought, and friendships being made in these smaller instanced games, then the fact that they do not exist in worlds filled with thousands of players shouldn't really matter, should it? Except that it kind of does, which is a contradiction. But not really. I believe everything I've said, but also I believe that once upon a time, MMORPGs were on the right track and that they went astray, precisely because they were chasing the massive. When games like EverQuest, Asheron's Call, Dark Age of Camelot and Star Wars Galaxies were catering to a few 100,000 players, there was room to maneuver, to find a niche of devoted players. But once you're shooting for WoW numbers, you're no longer creating a game with its own philosophy, you're applying a set of rules established by the most massive games. They work, we know how they work, but they only work if you follow this design. A great case in point would be my own favourite MMORPG, Star Wars Galaxies, a moderately successful game in the genre which suddenly looked like a failure in the eyes of its publisher after WoW launched. Suddenly the game's innovative attempt to create a virtual world in the Star Wars universe was abandoned for a WoW style of gameplay designed to trigger an exodus of WoW players, which never happened. All that happened was the game nearly died and its existing player base was left feeling disillusioned and betrayed. So the big MMORPGs like WoW and its ilk work for millions of players. That fact is not in dispute, but they also don't work for millions of others. I'm one of those for whom the repetitive on-rails gameplay of the massive MMOs has always felt shallow and unfulfilling. This in itself would not be a problem if there were options for players who dislike the WoW model. The problem arises because the WoW model became all MMORPGs all of the time. There are so few games now that look and feel any different. EVE Online is one, but the others are either incredibly old, Ultima is still running for instance, or indie efforts like Worm Online. There seems to be no desire on the part of developers to break the mold of the MMORPG established by WoW. But the idea that the desire to play something different isn't there is clearly false. The games I've mentioned from GTA Online to Minecraft all demonstrate the eagerness for something different. They're not massive, no, but the fact is they could be. If only massively multiplayer games hadn't become this one thing in the collective consciousness. Hotbars, levels, loot, dinging 50 so you're ready to raid, mobs with exclamation marks, and horse taxis. Imagine a AAA developer who decided to create a massively multiplayer game with none of these things. What would that game look like? Hard to imagine because it's been so long since anyone tried. We have to go all the way back to the muds of the previous century or experiments like Second Life and Project Entropia to recondition our brains, to forget that WoW ever happened. And it's more difficult for devotees of the MMORPG genre than for others. The players of Minecraft don't give two turds that it isn't massive, that there are no NPCs, that the endgame isn't defined. They're busy playing in this virtual world with other players living their virtual lives. In conclusion, I'm waiting for a truly different, massively multiplayer online game. I know it's possible. In the meantime, I'll be playing older MMOs like Star Wars Galaxies through emulation, games that hark back to that time where MMOs had things in them that appealed to me. Games that existed before the codification of the genre. And I'll be playing the new exciting multiplayer games that may not be massive, but they are trying different things in different genres different ways of approaching the idea of virtual worlds. Let me know in the comments if MMORPGs are still appealing to you, whether you're still playing them as avidly as you used to, or you're more like me and you feel a little bit disillusioned with what's being offered and you're casting around for new things that are in development. Because there are people out there who are definitely sensing the need for this newness and this new take on MMORPGs. Raph, Koster being one, he's just started a new company developing something massive and something multiplayer. So if you're interested in that, I did a video all about it. I'll link to it here. Don't forget to sub up too. You might like some of my other videos, and thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care and bye for now.